The coffee was bitter, the eggs were cold, and the pancakes meant for table 7 had mysteriously vanished into the swirling chaos of the kitchen. Miles Garrett tugged at the borrowed apron tied around his waist, forcing himself not to grimace as he watched the very restaurant he had once poured his soul into unravel before his eyes, collapsing like a house of cards caught in a hurricane. Golden Skillet Diner, his pride, his legacy. Once a warm and welcoming place filled with laughter, sizzling butter and dreams, now resembled little more than a battleground. The staff moved as if chained to the clock, eyes fixed on the exit rather than the faces of the guests. Customers were no longer people to delight, but problems to endure. A nervous new hire fumbled a tray of silverware, the sharp clatter piercing through the already tense air like a warning bell. From across the counter, the shift lead, with a voice sharp enough to cut steel, barked out, "Why are you just standing there like a lost puppy, Mike? Grab the damn coffee pot. Table 12 is burning holes through me with their eyes." Mike? That was the name he'd been using for the past week, posing as a brand new trainee. No one knew the man wiping tables and fetching orders was actually the owner of the diner they worked in. No one suspected that he had once stood in this very room with tears of pride in his eyes, cutting the ribbon on opening day. But it was that very anonymity that had revealed to him the things he never would have seen from his office, truths far more painful than any balance sheet or quarterly loss. Staff were careless, orders disappeared into thin air, guests walked out unheard, unacknowledged, unhappy. But what broke him more than the mismanagement, more than the inefficiency, was the apathy. The soul of the place, once so alive, had dimmed. What used to feel like home now felt hollow, and Miles knew, in that moment, he wouldn't recommend his own restaurant to someone he disliked, let alone someone he cared about. "Behind you." "Hot coffee," came a soft but steady voice behind him. Miles instinctively stepped aside just as a petite young woman slid past him with the poise of a practiced tightrope walker. Her dark hair was tied up in a messy bun, and she carried 3 full coffee pots with a grace that made it look effortless. She moved like someone who had memorized the dance of chaos, someone who had learned to move through tight spaces and impatient demands with both speed and calm. "Thank you," he said quietly, but she was already gone, leaning over to pour coffee for an elderly couple tucked into a quiet corner of the diner. Forgotten by most, the pair lit up under the warmth of her smile, a smile that felt real, not rehearsed. "That's Talia," Sandrew sneered from beside him, arms crossed. "Don't get any ideas, Romeo. She's weird, doesn't go out with us after work, keeps to herself, like she thinks she's too good for the rest of us." Miles didn't respond. He kept watching. Watched as Talia quietly wiped down a spill no one had asked her to clean. Watched as she knelt beside a tired young mother and helped cut pancakes into small, bite-sized pieces for her screaming toddler, with the gentle precision of someone who knew what it was like to be exhausted and alone. Weird? That wasn't the word Miles would have used. Professional, perhaps. Compassionate without a doubt. Throughout the entire shift, his eyes kept drifting toward her, like she was a mystery he couldn't stop trying to solve. While others sighed and rolled their eyes at complicated orders, Talia simply listened. When a cranky old man changed his mind for the 3rd time, she didn't flinch. When the kitchen mixed up a birthday order, she magically appeared with a single cupcake, stuck a napkin candle in it, and made a disappointed little girl laugh so hard she nearly dropped it. But it was during the peak lunch rush that something truly strange caught his attention. A businessman at table 4 left a generous tip, $20.00, on a $12.00 check. Talia picked it up, paused, looked around, then quietly returned it to the table and walked away. At first, Miles thought she'd made a mistake, but then it happened again and again. A construction worker left $15.00 on a $30.00 tab. Talia held the bill for exactly 3 seconds, then set it back down with a quiet determination. A group of college kids gathered $8.00 in loose bills and coins, clearly stretching their already thin budget. This time, Talia not only left their humble tip untouched, she added $5.00 from her own pocket, and then busied herself clearing their plates like it was nothing. Standing beside the salt and pepper station, Miles whispered to himself, "What is she doing?" To some, she might have seemed odd, but to him, each of those moments peeled back another layer, revealing a depth of character that shook him. By the time the shift ended, Miles had counted 17 separate occasions where Talia either refused, returned, or added to a tip. And with each act, his understanding of her deepened, and his need to know more only grew stronger. He also saw her volunteer to clean the grease trap when no one else would go near it. When Jimmy called out sick last minute, she stepped in to cover the final hour of his shift without complaint. That same night, he watched her gently wrap a cardigan around an elderly woman and walk her to her car under the dim parking lot lights, like it wasn't just her job, but her duty to make sure that woman got home, safe. "Hey, Mike." Her voice pulled him from his thoughts. Talia stood beside him, holding 2 plates of leftover apple pie. "Long first week, huh? You look like you've been hit by a truck." Up close, he noticed something in her eyes. Not just fatigue from a long shift, but something more enduring, more permanent. Her uniform was clean but clearly well-worn, carefully mended in multiple spots. It was the kind of detail that spoke volumes, about pride, about effort, about someone doing everything they could to maintain dignity despite limited means. "Yeah, let's call it educational," he replied, forcing a half-smile. She laughed softly, and for a moment the tiredness melted from her face. "Here, take this home. The chef made too much. Shame to let good pie go to waste." "What about you?" "Oh, I'm not much for sweets," she replied too quickly. Buddy saw it, that fleeting glance. The kind of look someone gives food when it's been too long since their last real meal. She walked away, holding a small envelope, disappearing into the back. Miles didn't move. Something in him cracked wide open. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just observe her anymore. He needed to understand her. In 15 years of managing restaurants, no one had ever made him feel so deeply, so urgently. And somehow, he knew. This story was either going to restore his faith in people, or break what was left of his heart. But which way would it go? The next morning, Miles arrived before the sun had fully risen, the parking lot still cloaked in mist. He stationed himself near the coffee station, pretending to organize supplies while subtly keeping his eyes trained on the hallway leading to the employee break room. At exactly 6:47 a.m., Talia slipped in like a shadow. Her hair was damp, likely washed at a nearby gas station. The sight of her tightened something in Miles's chest. He recognized that look, the haunted gaze of someone barely holding it together. But he had never seen anyone mask it so well. She entered the break room. Miles held his breath and crept a little closer. The sound of tape being peeled back made him freeze. Then came the soft rustle of paper, money being counted. When Talia emerged, the envelope was gone, but her expression was lighter, like she'd just completed the most important task of her day. "Morning, Mike," she called gently. "You're here early." "Couldn't sleep," he replied, lying. "Thought I'd get a head start." She smiled faintly and nodded. "New jobs can be exhausting, but you're doing really well. Everyone's noticed." Miles chuckled quietly. The irony wasn't lost on him. Being reassured by one of his own employees about fitting in at a restaurant he himself had built. The morning shift began, and Miles observed Talia like he was studying a familiar dance. She gravitated toward the worst section, the one with the broken heater and wobbly tables. When a customer spilled coffee on his laptop, Talia didn't just clean up the mess. She brought out a bag of rice to absorb the moisture and refused to charge him for a replacement meal. But it wasn't until the lull after lunch that Miles saw the true weight of what he was witnessing. Elsie Martinez, the dishwasher, a woman in her 40s, a single mother of 3 working 2 jobs to survive, emerged from the kitchen, clearly flustered. Miles remembered approving her application despite her sparse resume, moved by her sincerity. "Talia," Elsie whispered urgently, "I'm so sorry to ask, but do you have $5 I could borrow? My babysitter needs to be paid today and my check won't clear until tomorrow." Miles expected Talia to check her tip earnings from the morning rush. She didn't. Without hesitation, she reached into her purse and handed Elsie a $10 bill. "Take this. And please get yourself something to eat, too. You look exhausted." "I can't take this." "You can. We take care of each other here, remember?" As Elsie slipped back into the kitchen, Miles pretended to rearrange menus nearby. "That was really kind of you." Talia blushed slightly, shoulders rising in a small shrug. "She works harder than anyone. She deserves help. But you need it too." "I'm fine," she cut in quickly, turning away to wipe already spotless tables. The word "fine" lingered in the air like a lie both of them recognized, but didn't challenge. Later that day, during his break, Miles made an excuse to check inventory and snuck into the area near the employee room. Once he was sure no one was around, he slipped inside. It took only minutes to find what he was looking for. Beneath the sink, behind a pile of cleaning supplies, was a white envelope sealed tightly with tape. Carefully, he peeled back the flap. Inside was a wad of small bills, probably more than $200. All tips. But why was she hiding it? He didn't have to wait long for the answer. That night, he volunteered to take out the trash, giving him a perfect view of the employee parking lot. He watched as Talia walked into the break room, retrieved the envelope, sealed it, and made her way toward the lockers. She opened Elsie's locker, somehow knowing the combination, and placed the envelope inside with such gentleness it was as though she were handling something sacred. Miles felt his chest constrict. This wasn't just generosity. This was quiet, consistent sacrifice, giving away every dollar she earned to help someone who barely knew her. The next morning, he came in even earlier and positioned himself where he could observe the lockers. Sure enough, Elsie found the envelope and broke down, crying right there in the hallway. She looked around as if searching for the angel responsible, but Talia was already back at work setting up tables like nothing had happened. Miles knew then it was time to know the full truth. After Elsie's shift ended, he followed her to the bus stop. "Excuse me, Miss Elsie, I'm Mike, the new trainer." Later that day, Miles found Talia again. His voice was gentle, but filled with weight. "Can I ask you something?" Talia turned, her eyes still rimmed red. "Of course, Mike. What is it?" "The envelope. In Elsie's locker. How long has that been happening?" Her face faltered, pain flashing across it like a crack in glass. 3 months, she whispered, since her ex stopped paying child support and she had to pick up a second job. "I don't know who's been doing it, but whoever it is, they saved her family." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Whoever it is, they must know what it feels like to have no one." The bus pulled away, leaving Miles alone on the sidewalk, staring into the fading dusk where Talia's figure had disappeared. And in that silence, the full weight of what he'd witnessed settled into his soul. Talia Brooks wasn't just a good employee. She was a woman who had learned to survive by ensuring others didn't have to suffer the same way she had. Her compassion wasn't random. It was born of lived experience, and it was changing lives. During lunch break, Miles made an excuse to get some fresh air and quietly stepped out into the employee parking lot. As he approached the battered Civic, he saw a small cooler likely serving as a makeshift refrigerator. A pillow, a few neatly folded blankets, and a phone charger plugged into the cigarette lighter. "What are you doing out here?" Talia's voice rang out behind him. Miles turned, his face flushing with guilt. She stood about 10 feet away, eyes wary and guarded. "I was just getting some air," he stammered. She nodded slowly, her gaze shifting from the car to his face. The silence that followed was heavy and tense. "It's a nice day," she said flatly. "Yeah, really nice." She turned to walk away, but paused at the door. "Mike, everyone deserves privacy. Even people like me. People like me." That phrase echoed in Miles's mind the rest of the night, as if she believed she wasn't worthy of basic human dignity. That evening, he sat alone in his real office, Talia's personnel file open in front of him. He was no longer just trying to understand her. He was questioning himself. How could he, the owner of a successful restaurant chain, let someone like Talia, one of his hardest-working, most compassionate employees, sleep in a car? He started digging deeper, credit records, employment history, anything public that could offer context. And with each document, the outline of a quiet tragedy began to emerge. 2 years ago, Talia Brooks had been an assistant manager at a boutique hotel, earning a steady income. She had saved $8,000, 0 cents, toward a down payment on a small apartment. Her credit report showed responsible spending and consistent payments. Then came Derek Moss. Within a month, their joint account had been emptied, credit cards maxed out, a $15,000 0 cents personal loan taken out in her name. All of it right after she'd submitted a marriage license application. But the wedding never happened. Instead, there was a police report. He came home from work, and he was gone. All my savings were missing. I believe he fled the state. Miles read her statement over and over again, each time feeling the sting deeper in his chest. What followed was a spiral. She lost her job because she could no longer afford the professional wardrobe her hotel position required. She moved into a budget motel, then a shelter. She worked 3 part-time jobs just to keep food on the table and tried to chip away at the debt Derek had left her with. 8 months ago, she'd applied to Golden Skillet. In the previous employers section, she simply wrote, "Hotel work, references available upon request." No one had known, no one had seen, the pain behind her quiet presence. What broke Miles most was the promotion request buried in her file from 6 months ago. Talia had applied for the assistant manager position. The manager at the time rejected her with one note: lacks professional appearance, recommend keeping current role. She hadn't gotten the promotion, not because she lacked the skills, but because she couldn't afford a new blazer, and now she was trapped in a cycle. Too poor to look the part, not polished enough to earn the roles that would break the cycle. And yet, through it all, she gave and gave and gave. Miles leaned back in his chair, the weight of realization crushing him. Talia Brooks wasn't just the victim of a con man. She was the casualty of a system that valued image over integrity, appearance over substance. And he had unknowingly been part of it. But he wasn't going to let that be the end of her story. The next day, he walked into Golden Skillet with a plan. And for the first time in weeks, his heart wasn't just heavy, it was hopeful. "Stupid," Miles said, his voice low but steady, "is when a restaurant denies someone a promotion because they don't look like management material, while that same person is quietly holding the entire team together through their own sacrifice." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Talia, who sat with her head lowered, hands clenched tightly, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Talia," Miles said gently. She looked up, as if caught in a spotlight, vulnerable and exposed. Would you like to tell everyone where you've been sleeping for the past 2 months? Please, don't, she whispered. She's been living in her car, Miles announced. Right here in our parking lot. Every day, she comes in with a smile, takes care of our customers, and then curls up in the back seat of an old Honda Civic because there was no safer place to go. Elsie burst into tears. Oh my God, Talia, why didn't you tell me? I could have. Could have what? Talia finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. You're already struggling to feed your kids. Everyone here is barely making it. I wasn't going to add my problems to yours. But you added your money to ours, Jimmy said quietly. All this time, you were helping us, when you were the one who needed help the most. Miles drew a deep breath. This was the moment everything changed. There's something else you all need to know, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. My name's not Mike. It's Miles Garrett. I own this restaurant. Gasps rippled through the room. Sandra's jaw dropped. Jimmy dropped his coffee cup. Elsie stared speechless, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. I came in undercover because I thought this place was failing due to lazy staff or bad leadership. But the truth is, it was failing because people like me, management, weren't paying attention to what actually matters. He turned back to Talia. Talia Brooks. Starting today, you are officially promoted to Assistant General Manager. Your salary is $55,000, 0 cents a year, with full benefits, and you'll be staying in the apartment above the restaurant until you find a permanent place to live. Talia stared at him, stunned. What? There's more, Miles said, pulling out another envelope. This contains enough to pay off the debts Derek Moss left you with, and there's a bonus included for all the extra hours you worked while living through hell and never asking for a thing. The room erupted. Elsie ran to hug Talia, sobbing. Jimmy whooped in celebration. Sandra stood frozen, face pale. And Sandro, Miles added, turning to her. You're fired for fostering a toxic work environment and for being blind to the people who kept this place running. Sandra stormed out, speechless. Talia still sat there, hands trembling as she held the envelope. Her eyes welled over. Well, she asked, barely audible. Miles smiled, a quiet warmth returning to his chest. Because kindness deserves to be rewarded, not punished. And because the heart of this restaurant has always been in the right place. I just needed to learn how to hear it. 1 month later, Miles sat in his car across the street, watching Golden Skillet glow under the soft neon sign. The red brick exterior hadn't changed, but inside everything had. Through the window, he saw Talia weaving between tables with that same grace, but now in a crisp navy blazer. More than that, she walked with purpose, confidence, no longer trying to disappear. She was leading. She was home. Hot stuff behind you, Marcus called out, the new cook who had replaced Jimmy, now promoted to kitchen manager. The energy in the kitchen had transformed. It was no longer chaos fueled by yelling, but a rhythm of calm cooperation and mutual respect. Talia paused at table 6, where an elderly man sat quietly alone. She didn't just refill his coffee and move on. She sat down, engaged him in conversation, and coaxed a smile, the first one he'd crack all day. It was a small act, yet it symbolized a complete shift in the soul of the restaurant. The apartment above the diner had become a home. When Talia moved in, she had nothing but 2 trash bags filled with belongings, but within a week she turned that simple space into something warm and personal, not with expensive furniture, but with thoughtful touches, a fabric tablecloth, a jar of origami flowers, and picture frames holding printed snapshots of memory. Miles realized what we consider basic, a private bathroom, a kitchen, a door that locks, can mean the world to someone else. Talia led differently. Her presence inspired, not demanded. The staff didn't just work anymore, they moved with purpose. Gone were the weary scowls, replaced with real smiles and a steadiness in their steps. The whole place felt lighter. Customers stayed longer, tipped more generously, and returned more often. But the moment that made Miles realize he had truly done something right didn't come during the lunch rush. It came at closing time. As the last guest paid and left, Talia gathered the team around the central table. Time for a family meeting. Present were Elsie, Marcus, Jimmy, two new hires named Deanna and Roberto, and Jake, the youngest busser who had been juggling school and work. "Jake, how'd your interview go today?" "I got in. I start community college next month. I'll probably need to switch shifts." "That's amazing," Talia said, beaming. "We'll make it work. School comes first." "I know, did you get the info on the insurance?" "Yeah, and I still can't believe how much the company covers. It's the first real insurance I've had in 3 years. Then she turned to Roberto. "Your wife's baby shower is next Saturday, right? Take the day off. Family comes first. We'll figure it out." Afterward, Talia pulled out a familiar white envelope. "Our emergency fund for this month is up to $430.00. That'll cover Jake's textbooks, and the rest can help anyone who needs support with utilities or groceries." Miles swallowed hard, emotion catching in his throat. She was still giving, but now it was structured, sustainable. "This fund comes from 3 sources," Talia explained to Roberto, who was still new. "Voluntary staff contributions, unclaimed tips left in the lost and found for over 30 days, and a monthly donation from management." She turned and looked directly at the window, right where Miles was seated, watching. Because taking care of each other isn't charity, it's what family does. As the group broke off to begin their closing tasks, Talia walked into the break room, pulled out a fresh envelope, and placed it beneath the sink, the exact spot where Miles had once discovered her quiet generosity. But this time the envelope had a new label in her unmistakable handwriting. "Emergency Fund. Pay it forward." Miles started his car, a deep sense of peace settling over him. Golden Skillet hadn't turned around because he fired Sandra or promoted Talia. It changed because he finally learned what leadership truly meant. Not authority, but the ability to see and elevate those who deserve it. In his rearview mirror, he saw Talia turn off the lights, lock the door, and head upstairs. To her home. Tomorrow, she'd wake in her own bed, shower in her own bathroom, and come downstairs to lead a team that respected her, not because of her title, but because of the way she made them feel seen and valued. The woman who once slept in her car and gave away every dollar she could spare was now changing lives, from a place of strength and stability. And the envelope beneath the sink? It would remain because Miles now understood. Kindness is the only investment that always pays off. Some stories end with justice. This one ended with hope.